Hi, and welcome to the Origins Podcast. I'm your host, Lawrence Krauss. As many of you know, my new book, The War on Science, is appearing July 29th of this year in the United States and Canada. And to celebrate that, we've interviewed many of the authors, of the 39 authors who have contributed to this volume. And we have 20 separate podcast interviews that will be airing over the next 20 days, starting July 22nd, before and after the book first appears, with many of the authors in the book on a host of different subjects. The authors we will have interviews with in order of appearance over the next 20 days are Richard Dawkins, Niall Ferguson, Nicholas Christakis, Maarten Boudry, Abigail Thompson, John Armstrong, Sally Satel, Solveig and Joshua Katz, Francis Widdowson, Carole Hooven, Janice Fiamengo, Geoff Horsman, Alessandro Strumia, Roger Cohen and Amy Wax, Peter Boghossian, Lauren Schwartz and Arthur Rousseau, Alex Byrne and Moti Gorin, Judith Sisa and Alice Sullivan, Carleen Gribble, and finally Dorian Abbott. The topics that will be discussed will range over the need for free speech and open inquiry in science and the need to preserve scientific integrity, stressed by our first podcast interviewee, Richard Dawkins, and will once again go over historical examples of how academia has been hijacked by ideology in the past and the negative consequences that have come from that, to issues of how specific disciplines, including mathematics, have been distorted, and how certain departments at universities now specifically claim that they are social activists, and a degree in their field is a degree in either critical social justice or social activism, not a degree in a specific area of scholarship, how ideology has permeated universities. We'll proceed also to discuss issues in medicine. Sally Satel will talk about how social justice has hijacked medicine. And also, when it comes to issues of gender-affirming care, we have a variety of authors who are going to speak about the issues there and how too often gender-affirming care claims are made that are not based on empirical evidence, in fact, falsely discuss the literature in ways that are harmful to young people. We'll talk to several people who, for one reason or another, have been canceled for saying things. Francis Widdowson at Mount Royal University in Canada, and Carole Hooven from Harvard, who eventually had to leave Harvard after saying on television that sex is binary in biology. We'll be talking to people who've looking at the impact of diversity, equity, and inclusion in academia and how it's restricting free inquiry and also restricting, in many ways, scientific merit at those universities. And finally, Dorian Abbott, the last contributor to our series, will be talking about 3 principles he believes are essential to separate science and politics and keep academia free from ideology and more for open questioning and progress, and to make sure that science is based on empirical evidence, and where we go where the evidence is, whether it's convenient or not, whether it's politically correct or not, and we're willing to debate all ideas, that nothing is sacred, a central feature of what science should be about and what, in some sense, this podcast is about. So I hope you really enjoy the next 20 days, and we've enjoyed bringing it to you. So with no further ado, The War on Science, the interviews. Well, Carole Hooven, it's a pleasure to see you again and to have you on the Origins podcast. And it's also great to have you contributing to The War on Science. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for asking me to contribute and for hosting me today. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Well, I always have enjoyed our conversations, and I know I'll enjoy this one. But what you may not know, you may not be glued to YouTube to watch the Origins podcast, but the Origins podcast, so I like to find out about people's origins, of how they got to the starting point of what we're going to talk about. So I want to learn a little bit more about you. I know you did a BA in Antioch College. Where's Antioch? Is it in Ohio? No.
Antioch is in Ohio, and it has a storied past. Actually, my parents met there. My mom and my dad met there in the late, let's see, 50s. And no, sorry, earlier than that. And anyway, my parents met there, but it was known as a pretty liberal institution even then, and it was extremely liberal, and it was the first first university to have a co-op program. It's actually the first college to have a cooperative education program. So I got to live on a kibbutz, travel around Egypt, work for the government, work with autistic kids, work with schizophrenic adults as part of my education. So I would take 3 months and go and have these really interesting experiences, and that gave me the travel bug. But I should mention that they also canceled me when I was supposed to give a book talk on my book, T, The Story of Testosterone. They canceled me for my ostensibly transphobic
Okay. That's
works. But anyway, yeah, so I got a BA at Antioch, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful for me at the time, and it changed a lot. It became extremely woke is what happened.
yes, of course, like most places, but when we'll talk about that. But so, what was your degree in? Was it?
Psychology.
I thought it was psychology. Okay. What? And now your parents met there. You didn't grow up in Ohio, though, did you?
No, I grew up in Massachusetts.
Okay. And but your parents were, so what got you into psychology? Were your parents academics at all, or no?
My father, they got divorced when I was 3, but my dad was a ABD for his MIT dissertation. So
Nope.
he was sort of a failed academic.
Okay.
And my mom, and then I was raised with my mom and my stepfather. My stepfather was a professor at Brandeis from 1950 on. He was a professor of American Studies. And I should mention that his brother, Victor Fuchs, so my stepfather who raised me was Lawrence Fuchs, and his brother, who recently died at, I think, 99, was Victor Fuchs, who's a well-known healthcare economist. And I should just say publicly here that I saw at his memorial service, which was on Zoom, Alan Garber praising my uncle for having been his mentor. And this was shortly after the congressional hearing in which my name was brought up by Elise Stefanik to Claudine Gay as an example of Harvard's hypocrisy, not supporting someone to say that who says there are two sexes, but allowing people to protest during October 7th in ways that intimidated the Jewish students. But so I saw that, and then I called Garber's office. He was the provost at the time. Because I had seen him sitting right behind Claudine Gay, and then I saw him at my uncle's service, and I thought, holy crap, he's this family friend. He loves my uncle, but he refused, or his office said he can't meet with everyone who reaches out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's again, university administrators. We had that conversation earlier.
But so yes, so my stepfather, who I was raised with, was an academic, and my mom was in academic administration. Her last job was the VP at Wellesley College of Development.
Okay, so they were happy. Well, so okay, so you came from academic household, and it wasn't too surprising then that maybe you wanted to be an academic, or I assume, and that was and what got you interested in psychology. Your father had a real degree, right, from MIT. So he was in?
Well, no, he didn't get it. He didn't get it. He was interested in psychology and philosophy, but he ended up not pursuing that career. I think I was just interested in human behavior ultimately. But then at Antioch as a psychology major, I was really blown away by when I started learning about the brain and took a course, biological psychology. And I thought, this is it. This is what I need, is something firmer, something testable, and then became interested in evolution and did more traveling and switched careers, and eventually went to Harvard for my graduate degree.
Yes. Okay. And you did your graduate degree in biological anthropology. And
yeah, and that department, I should say, morphed into human evolutionary biology.
and organismal evolution or something.
No, no. So this is a very important distinction at Harvard because the other there's another biology department, which is organismic and evolutionary biology. My department was sorry, my ex department, whatever you want to call it, is human evolutionary biology. And there was another situation where there was an attack on me from essentially the chair of organismic and evolutionary biology. So there's OEB and HEB. My old department was HEB.
Okay. But in between the two, you were, I don't know if it got you interested in biological anthropology, but you were in Uganda, right, with chimpanzees, watching them and
So
seeing.
yeah, I was supposed to be out there for a year. So I had applied to Harvard to the biological anthropology program. I wanted to work with Richard Wrangham because I was inspired by his book. So I was interested in human behavior, and he had this book about the evolutionary origins of human aggression. And it wasn't aggression that I was interested in particular, but he, through this book, showed me how we can answer questions about large patterns of human behavior by using an evolutionary framework, and that you could actually study non-human animals and look for, what makes us similar and what makes us different. So I applied.
Origin, when I was at my university, we had him, he came and talked about just that subject. Go on.
Yeah, yeah, and it's fascinating because it's taking human culture out of the mix, right? And I had um this was planting the seeds of my skepticism about claims that culture is the cause of things like sex differences over inherited biology, say, and I came to understand that it's a deep mix of the two forces, but so I applied to Harvard to work with Richard Wrangham. I got rejected because I had no experience. I'd been working in like a startup software company since, for 10 years or something. And I had traveled a lot and read a lot, but
It's 10 years between your undergraduate. I didn't know that. You've been
yeah,
working in software. Okay, that's
yeah. So I could just completely changed careers, applied to this graduate program. Of course, I didn't get in. I went to Antioch, which didn't even give grades.
Yeah, okay.
Um, so I pestered a bunch of people in the department. I met with Richard. He offered me this job out in Uganda, managing his research site for a year and doing some research of my own.
Mhm.
Uh, and I did that. And what happened, which was amazing, being out essentially in the jungle, like in the wild with wild chimps, just mind blowing. Because when you see them, you can see them in the movies or on documentaries and stuff. But when you're right there with them, it just hits you in the gut. I'm like tearing up just thinking about it. My first time seeing them, how much like us they are, right? And again, you're in the jungle. It's not about human culture at all. It's just about what we share genetically and how that leads to, the mechanisms, uh, hormones, neurotransmitters, and all these aspects of our biology that unite us deeply, deeply, in deep evolutionary ways. So, um, I ended up having to get evacuated because this was in 1999, sorry, 98 and 99, and there was a huge amount of political turmoil and violence and, like, really brutal violence at the time, in the Congo that was, like, spilling over to where I was in Western Uganda, and people were getting hacked up. I mean, it was awful and, scary, and the Peace Corps had to be evacuated. There were threats against white people of beheading. There was some really horrific violence against a group of tourists from, Europe who were at the Bwindi research site, watching gorillas, and they all ended up being just brutally raped and murdered, and, so I was still out there, as pretty much alone in a research site. I had my field assistants, in the middle of the Kanyawara research area, and so I ended up getting evacuated after 8 months because supposedly the rebels were coming towards my site. Uh, so that experience where I'm watching the males. I'm in the forest, and I'm really what was really exciting to me was the male violence, especially because it was so frequent, not extreme. So what's interesting is the male violence, the male aggression is relatively subdued within a community of related males. But they're competing for dominance, they're competing for sex, they're competing for resources like food or sleeping spaces. But when they would defend their territory, they would cooperate because and there was no fighting, there were deep bonds between them, and they would form essentially a line and patrol the periphery of their territory looking for neighboring males to pick off.
Yeah,
They are guarding the resources that the females need to reproduce. Like, it's so interesting and deep, and Richard was the one who kind of figured out how that worked, that the males are essentially guarding the territory that has the food that the females need. All the males, by cooperating, are benefiting reproductively, essentially. And they have psychological adaptations to allow them to cooperate in two different kinds of violence. The proactive violence, where they're trying to cooperate to pick off neighboring males, and then the reactive kind of aggression within the social dominance hierarchy. But anyway, so I got really interested in testosterone. And for obvious reasons, I think, because of that, because the females were not doing that in the same way. Of course, they can be aggressive also, but they were primarily tending to their offspring and, significantly more peaceful. There just wasn't routine aggression. In fact, I never saw any in 8 months, but they can be extremely aggressive.
It's a totally aside, but it's interesting because a good friend of mine, late Franz Duvall, I've had on the
Oh,
program,
yeah,
bonobos versus chimps. I wonder if
right.
female chimps have testosterone. Anyway,
Female chimps?
yeah, no, female bonobos.
They do.
Yeah, okay,
They
yeah,
do. There's a whole interesting testosterone thing going on with bonobos that's very
yeah.
different. We have Maarten Surbeck now at Harvard in the department I used to be in, who works on bonobos and is producing a lot of really interesting research. We need a lot more research on them. They're not easy to habituate. They're much harder to get to in the Congo.
His
Say it
story,
again.
Franz's books on and stories about bonobos. Franz Duvall is
Yes.
anyway.
And the
Okay,
way they use sex to diffuse tension. I mean, it's
yeah, no,
really quite
exactly.
interesting.
It's a great, the difference. Well, what's intriguing is that we're equally related to bonobos and chimps, apparently, evolutionarily.
Yes.
And so we have, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
Anyway,
there's a lot of argument about which ones were sort of more closer to behaviorally, but
okay, but to get back to the story, which is now, which is weaving all around. So you went and you spent that year, or almost a year, when you were saved, and then you were able to, based on that, you had enough credentials to get into Harvard. Is that
I
what
had reapplied from out in the field and, yeah, and then I got into the grad program
okay.
by some
And
miracle.
then and that's when you actually worked on hormonal evolution and the basis of sex differences and things like that. That was your
Yeah, so I ended up actually switching my focus, and I worked with Steve Koslin, who's, in, cognitive neuropsychology, so I did a lot of my actual work then in the psychology department, and that's where I initially got to know Steve, and I ended up being a teaching fellow for him and his
Mm.
uh, course as a grad student. But I actually collected saliva from men and gave them various cognitive tests and showed them pornography and dental surgery to look at the testosterone responses. But ultimately, I did my dissertation on sex differences in mental rotation, which is an aspect of human cognition, actually, and lots of other animals. So we have, spatial ability and verbal ability, and we don't, really realize when we're using our spatial ability, but we're using it all the time. So men are better than women in spatial ability. People don't like me saying that, but that's just what the data say. That is the largest cognitive sex difference there is.
Visual. Oh, interesting. That's
Yeah.
why maps. Okay, interesting. Well, okay, so this is to establish that you know something about sex, at least.
Okay.
In sex, at least sex differences. Um, And
Yeah, I
okay,
mean, that's what I've been focusing on since
grad.
the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. And so no, okay, so let's now we'll get to your piece, which is why I left Harvard, and it's a piece, but the ordeals that you've gone through, which the book has a variety of different kinds of experiences of people, and the different facets of your experience are in some ways quite typical and also equally horrendous. So let's go. And of course, it become quite public because of because you were at Harvard. So and the fact, as you begin by saying in the piece, my ordeal has been used to illustrate the hypocrisy of the assertions by Harvard leaders that they honor the robust exchange of challenging ideas. And you were mentioned, as you point out, in the congressional hearing. Um, uh, Claudine Gay had said a number of silly things, but it had said that their administration was deeply committed to free expression. And then it was Tim Wahlberg who said at the hearing, apparently, brought your name up. Carole Hooven, an
Oh,
evolutionary
wait,
biologist.
was it?
Yeah, Tim Wahlberg, according to
Okay. No, that's right. That's right. Sorry. Thank you, because I think I've told
well, yeah,
other
yeah,
people it's the least, but you're right.
thank
That's
you.
right.
Well, I assume telling the truth because I
It's
read
in
it.
the article.
Yeah, that's right. Said Carole Hooven, an evolutionary biologist, was forced to resign because she stated that a person's sex is biological and binary. And so, President K, in what world is a call for violence against Jews protected speech, believes that sex is biological and binary isn't? Now, we did get it a little wrong. You were sort of mentally forced to resign, but not actually forced to resign. But we'll get
That's
to
right.
and so, but that demonstrates that, and that kind of hypocrisy, which is one of the reasons. That I think ultimately there's many reasons why perhaps Claudine had to resign. Here's her statement, which is also in your piece, and this amazed me for Claudine Gay in particular to say this. Someone who's you're not the only person at Harvard that whose politically incorrect beliefs were punished by her as dean. But she said the moment that our students arrive on campus, whether it is to begin their Harvard journey as an undergraduate or one of the professional schools, the message to them is clear that we're an inclusive community, but one deeply committed to free expression. Such nonsense. It came,
Yes.
came last, and we've talked about this a number of times. It came last in the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression's free speech rankings. In fact, it had a negative score for a while until it was raised to zero. Um, but and so you okay, we've already talked about your background. Basically you got into Harvard in 2004. And the interesting thing is you then obtained a kind of unique position.
Yeah.
You Yes, sir. But why don't you explain what
Yeah. So as a graduate student, when I left my career, which probably would have ended up being lucrative, far more lucrative than being the low level academic that I was, uh, I left it because it just wasn't super interesting or fulfilling to me, and I had this strong curiosity about what we've already these issues that we've already talked about, which really arose from traveling all over the world by myself and seeing different cultures and different ecosystems, etcetera. So when I applied to the grad program, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just wanted to dive into this area and do some research and explore it. So when I got my PhD, it wasn't that I had this ambition to be a big shot professor, but I found that I loved teaching, and I just didn't have the required ambition that I would have needed to even try to stay at Harvard. I just would never have reached that level. You have to be one of the top in the world, and that there's no way that was going to be me. But I think I know I was an excellent
you get
teacher. And
hearing you talk about things, it's so clear that you must be an excellent teacher.
okay. Well, I got, really strong teaching reviews, but now that I don't have that in my life anymore, I was working really hard, but it's until you teach, you can't really realize how deeply fulfilling it is to work that hard and get everything that I'm going to cry, everything that you gave back. It's so deeply satisfying emotionally, and it's interesting. It's deeply interesting. It's challenging. You're always learning, and you see the excitement in your students, and you see them change and learn and grow. So I was totally into it, and I knew I wanted to stay and do that. And I did, and I could do it because they hired me as a lecturer, and you can stay on as a lecturer at Harvard for 3 years, and then you have to go. But they started a program essentially where they had PhD level academic advisors in the science departments, and I got hired as that. And eventually I became co-director of undergraduate studies. So this was ideal for me because I got to immerse myself in the undergraduate life. And so not only was I teaching and advising and serving, as the uh, supervisor for senior theses and working with students on those and advising them on their research, but also really getting to know them and what they wanted out of life and what courses not just what courses they should take, but who they wanted to be, and they ended up opening up to me about a lot of things, and there were very strong relationships, and that was wonderful. All of that was great. The part that wasn't so great, but I was fine with it. I, went to faculty meetings and everything, but I wasn't a tenure track faculty member. So I'm kind of bottom of that faculty totem pole.
But
Uh,
nevertheless, fortunate in the sense that you were untenured, but basically had an indefinite appointment, unlike election.
yes. Yeah, and I knew that I was gonna be there, until I could no longer do it. It was a great job, but now I realize that how hard I was working and how many other things I neglected now that I have a little more
Right.
time. But yeah, it was a rich, very rich career, and I felt extremely lucky, and I worked like I was lucky.
Well,
Um, so that's part of what, and I had glowing reviews across the board. For the advising, I won awards, I won a lot of teaching awards, I was voted favorite professor many times. So what happened was shocking. I just that's the background. I was like, I
fac-
just was so naive.
faculty member, I mean, beloved teacher and colleague, I assume.
I
And
think so.
I mean, how could you not be? You're so charming. But anyway, and then you also wrote that book, the
Oh, right.
and is that, and then in July 2021, you were invited on Fox and Friends. Was it because of the book, or how did that invite actually happen? It's not in your article, but it's intriguing for me.
So, Katie Herzog, who's a journalist and co-host with Jesse Singal, now co-host with Jesse Singal, the Blocked and Reported podcast, which is excellent. Um, she at that time had written an investigative piece for what was Barry Weiss's Substack. She didn't yet have the free press. And this piece was right up my alley. So I was invited to supply a quote. Her piece was on what is happening. This was in 2021, and it was not the same as it is now. This was the height. You can look at the graphs that show the height of cancellations and woke craziness. It was 2021, exactly when all of this happened to me. So Katie was investigating the claims that medical school professors were backing away from using terms like pregnant woman and male and female. My entire career was built on the importance of the categories of male and female and knowledge about how we're different for cultural and evolutionary reasons, and why essentially we're not the same, and the ways that we're different are not just due to culture. So as an educator and an expert in this area, and I should just say the way that I always taught, and which was always it always worked with my students. I mean, okay, granted, there began to be a few exceptions around 2015, um, but I assumed and told my students that they would be offended, and I said, "This is great.
Ye-
This means you're learning. It's how you respond to this is what matters. This should be a red flag that you need to open your heart and mind and listen and challenge evidence. This is not about you and your emotions. It's about reality." And it worked. So there's no way. So I was like, yeah, I'll go on fire. I'm a Democrat. But, and I thought, oh, maybe people, oh,
Find you from that though. I mean, I'm just wondering, the producers look around. Was it because
okay. So I contributed to the article, and I said, this is
you contributed
so
the
I
article?
contributed to the article. Sorry, I skipped over it. It's my fault for being
Okay.
all
And now
going
that
all over the place.
interested,
I contributed to the article, And I said, no, especially medical school students need to learn what male and female is. These are our future doctors. This is ridiculous, blah, blah. They invited Katie and she declined. And,
Okay.
that's another story. They invited me and they're like, do you want to be on it?
And you I just want to say yeah, I mean, she probably knew the whole thing better than you, what was going to happen. But
No,
she said in
she
the
would
book,
have said it. There are other reasons for this, but I should just say my book had just come out, had never been on TV before. And you can tell from the clip if you see it.
yeah, this
Don't know how to behave.
you said that understanding the facts about biology doesn't prevent us from treating people with respect. We can respect their gender identities and use their preferred pronouns. But you also mentioned that educators are increasing self-centered for fear of using the wrong language that could result in being shunned or even fired. Nothing.
Yeah, I said people are getting fired for saying what I'm saying, which all I'm saying is there are two sexes. It's not on a spectrum. It's about the kinds of gametes
You didn't
organisms
say there were
produce.
two sexes, right? I mean, you didn't. You specifically said that sex is binary.
Yeah, I mean, I was very clear because I was sick of people insisting that it's on a spectrum for ideological reasons. It is bullshit. It's not on a spectrum. That's ridiculous. There are two sexes. There's sperm and eggs. You have to get them together to reproduce.
Yeah, yep. Okay. Now, okay, so that was your first experience, and um, you discovered that in the modern world, speaking not only accurately, but speaking political, to maybe the wrong people, um, is problematic. And so
Okay, can I just
go on.
sorry, I know we have a little time limit here or something, but
No, I'm just
okay, I just want to interject. I didn't discover, I knew that some grad students didn't like my views, the woker grad students in human evolutionary biology, don't forget, right?
okay.
Um, and so I thought, oh, maybe the grad students will be upset with me, but of course the faculty know I'm not transphobic and are going to defend me, and I've been, a loyal and excellent faculty member for over 20 years or however long. Yeah, I wasn't exactly faculty, whatever. I was there in the department for a very long time. And so I was just like, and plus it was really important. I was like, of course I'm going to say this. There's no way I'm not saying this, regardless of what happened. So I was just like, but I had faith, I think, that the administration or faculty, if anything happened, would support me. But I
Yeah,
didn't like consider it. I was just like, I'm doing this anyway, whatever.
what we've learned and what's been explicit in a number of articles, but it's quite clear that universities are not interested in either truth or defending or academic integrity or free speech. University administrators, they're interested in what is expedient for them at the moment. And
Yeah, I mean, of course, they're interested in those things, but they're much more interested in expediency for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, they're much more governed by it, and that's part of the problem. And one of the reasons it's necessary to speak out is
Right.
that if we're going to change this cultural issue internally, and that's what the book's all about. Not only do faculty have to speak out, but we have to realize that the problems are, and many problems are in academic administration of people without backbone, and really their jobs are really remembering. They should be to remember what the mission of a university is all about, which is to produce and disseminate knowledge and promote free speech and free inquiry. And a lot of them have lost track of that. Their job is to make sure certain people are happy and the donations come in, and
Yes,
that there's no, online stories that might embarrass someone. So
that's
it,
right.
it's, and of course, the big problem is, as you next point out, is that universities become dominated by this bureaucracy called diversity, equity, and inclusion bureaucracies, and they're very powerful within universities. But in your case, they're so powerful that many departments and at and not all universities have this, but clearly at Harvard they did have
Well, I
the
think a lot of the universities do have that. Yeah, and people don't appreciate how powerful they are within the departments.
yeah, 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 exactly. I mean, yeah. Anyway, there are departmental DI committees
Yeah.
that are typically staffed by faculty, staff, and grad students, which is amazing. And you say these committees, and they weren't at the universities I was at the time, but in any case, it's amazing to me. They have profound influence on departmental culture and on matters ranging from who should give a talk, wow, what is taught,
Oh, yeah.
who's hired, and it reaches into daily academic life. And what is, I guess, not surprising in retrospect, having seen it, especially seeing that I've experienced this too. Some graduate students are more interested in things than what they're studying. that the director of the task force was a graduate student, which is interesting. You'd think that the director would be a faculty member or a staff member, but she responded. Can I read her response? Okay. She tweeted, that as director of the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force for my department at Harvard,
So
not
she's clearly representing herself as speaking on behalf of my department and Harvard.
which
That's
is,
the mistake.
I'm appalled and frustrated by the transphobic and harmful remarks made by a member of my department in this interview with Fox and Friends.
With my picture and name right underneath.
And yeah, exactly. And a
And
clip.
I'm the co-director of undergraduate studies. I'm the one who's supposed to be taking care, which I always did.
Yeah.
And everyone in my department knew how much I cared about them. So
And
there's no way that, yeah, anyway.
and so you responded, which may have, which is also interest in the modern world. Sometimes responding is good or bad. But you said, you quote her tweet and said, "I appreciate your concerns. Could you let me and the Twitterverse know exactly what I said that you consider transphobic or harmful to undergrads? I think you know that I care deeply about all of my students. I also care about science. How about a discussion?" And then reference the Harvard HEB department, and it got it got a lot of attention, and it also raised the profile of her tweet, and that may or may not have caused, introduced the next thing, which is that there was a lot of media coverage, right? And one could say biased media coverage. Do you want to go into that, or yeah?
Yeah, I mean, the question of whether I should have retweeted, I had like 1,000 followers on Twitter or something. Like, I just wasn't really using it that much. And plus, I had no public profile. I was nobody. Um, I think I felt like I want to control this narrative. I don't want this charge from my own department out there uncountered. But I think, honestly, I also must have wanted to expose, just pop the zit, because I knew that there was this tension in the department. Like, this had been going on with this committee and the way the faculty were responding, just kowtowing to the committee, and they're always sending out surveys. How is everybody feeling? Are you feeling offended? Do you want to join this affinity group? Let's spend all this time and money and energy on having meetings where we listen to all of your complaints, and we send out 50,000 emails asking what your identity is and if you're suffering in any way, and telling you to report what you see, and blah, 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 blah. Claudine Gay, what she said was BS, because there were never any emails from the administration or inside our department about, hey, let's ensure that we, uphold the values of Veritas and do our fucking jobs. That wasn't a thing. There's so much time and energy given to essentially the graduate students. And it was like this in so many departments. And if the grad students really didn't like who they wanted to hire because they maybe had more conservative views or something, that was taken very seriously, because the faculty don't want to deal with complaining graduate students who might say something on Twitter, who knows, or will make their lives miserable or ruin their reputations. They're all very sensitive to reputational damage. And of course, the higher up in the administration you are, the more sensitive you are to that kind of damage. You've got a lot to lose. So, yes. So I retweeted her tweet, and then it was picked up like by the Australian, by the,
Let me read the
New York and UK and all over the place. It looked like a DEI dean had accused me of transphobia.
A Harvard professor refuses to use the term pregnant people and insists on woman is accused
Didn't
of
say anything about that, about
colleague.
woman or anything.
Yeah, I know.
I didn't anyway. I said male and female. I just stuck to that.
Again, the headline was wrong, and it says you're accused by your colleague, and
And she was a Black female, and that mattered, because nobody wanted to confront her or, punish her or tweet that it doesn't represent our department, because she had more sort of, I was punching down on the identity and on the status rank.
Powerful faculty member were punching down. You as a non-tenured individual, but somehow powerful, were punching down. In fact, there was a lot of discussion about that apparently. And then the Harvard Crimson.
Well, she claimed she was suffering racist abuse and that I had done this to her.
She said, she respected you, and you asked that we can be caring and sensitive to the needs of identities of everyone while sticking to reality. But the article linked to a statement um, claimed that she'd suffered a multi-day deluge of personal harassment, racist abuse, and threats of physical harm after her response was amplified by you.
So it's my fault. So essentially, that was the narrative, that I had done this to her. And
So let's talk about how the administration started to then deal with it. I So you got an email that was sent to the department chair, and it was called Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee wants to express our unwavering support for transgender individuals in our community and everywhere. And it goes on. And
so that was from the OEB chair. That was a whole other complaint. That was a separate situation that happened after this one. But my chair essentially pretended that he was going and I'm sorry, but this is what happened. He was behaving as though he was going to send this very kind and supportive letter saying that this is not some, tenured faculty member. This is a beloved, I forget the actual verbiage.
Let me step back.
Yeah, you go ahead.
It's important. The university administrators shouldn't, as you point out, should not publicly disparage the characters of those with whom they disagree, but on the other hand, they do it all the time. And you realize that unless you had some support from your administrators, including the dean, Claudine Gay at the time,
Yeah.
you were going to be in trouble. At this point, you realized you needed some support. So that's when you got an email from the dean of science offering to meet. But in the end, that didn't work out well because you had the temerity to ask him a question, and you got a stern lecture about asking questions.
Yes. No, like, no, about don't interrupt me, because there was nothing about me. It was all, we're going to establish this committee and that committee. And I was like, I need someone to help me here. I'm crumbling.
So you got a draft of an email that an administrator, you don't say who,
from it was my chair.
Your chair sent a draft of an email that included a robust defense of you.
Yes.
Thanked them for this. And then, but that email was never sent.
No.
And instead, a different email was sent.
Yeah. That looked like I had done something wrong and failed to consider the impact of my words on vulnerable people. But that one was sent after the chair of OEB sent a letter around to a public, or to a listserv, of a couple hundred people for their department and affiliates, where a trans woman grad student on their internal DEI committee complained about a book talk I was supposed to give, hosted by Dan Gilbert, who is a well-known psychology professor who wrote Stumbling on Happiness. Yeah. Who was a friend of mine, and he had the balls to appear with me publicly at that time, which was a big deal because I was being so attacked from within Harvard, and he publicly supported me. That meant a lot to me. But the trans woman complained that people shouldn't go to the talk because I'm transphobic, and here's the evidence of my transphobia. And then the chair, who later apologized to me personally through tears, saying she feared for her own reputation, what she did is just send that complaint around to the entire department and others who were also in my department, with a foreword saying, essentially endorsing the complaint, saying we support trans people. Like, I'm there, she's protecting them, from me.
Yeah. Now let's see. This is the email that said it was not the intent of our DIB committee, or is that the one from your chair?
That was her.
Not the intent of our DIB.
Sorry, that was the one signed by the chair of OEB and my chair in HEB, which I begged him not to send, and please send the other one that was super supportive. But he had a committee who was writing it with him. The dean of, I know this because he kind of kept me abreast of what was going on. DEI dean, science dean, and I believe that Claudine Gay must have been involved. And the communications dean or whatever at Harvard.
It basically apologized for you, as if you'd done something. It said,
yes,
the intent of our committee to cause damage to Dr. Hooven's reputation, but to raise important issues about best practices in science communication, right, and for the serious impact of our science impact our scientific opinions may have on others. We apologize. So it suggested that you, as you say, you'd fail to respect the serious impact of your scientific opinions.
Okay, what do you think
Finding
should have happened? I
next.
want
What?
What do you think? I mean, that's exactly the opposite of what should have happened in my view, and signaled to me I would not be supported in doing my work.
Yeah.
And I was isolated, and I couldn't teach my class, but we'll probably get to that. But what do you think should have happened in response to that?
In
What should the letters have said?
Well, obviously, the letter should have said Dr. Hooven was we defend her right to speak the truth is what it should have said, and that she, she's a beloved faculty member, and she said nothing that isn't scientifically accurate, and moreover, we defend her right
Right. Something along those lines, right?
academic freedom, that the university respects differences of opinion, and we
Right.
we don't penalize people for disagreeing, etc., etc. So that's
Right.
what it. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. In any case, this obviously at this point you were having a real problems, as you say, you were diagnosed with severe depression, but then something else happened, and this is again typical. So I want to talk about it. You this wonderful course you taught, hormones and behavior, for the first time ever in the spring of 2022. No graduate students would agree to serve as teaching fellows for my course. And this was, I assume, some orchestrated activity. I assume.
I assume so.
I'm sorry. I know. Yeah, I know. I know it's hard for you. I know from having talked to you about it before. Um, it's an incredible blow,
So,
Mhm.
yeah, I have no way of like verifying that it was the graduate student union that took out this petition against me that was published in the Crimson.
Nope.
And I relied on graduate students to teach my class because I had, I had generally it was the largest course in the department every year. There were exceptions to that when like they brought in outside lecturers and stuff. But so they refused, like, I had no teaching assistants, and, so had to teach my last course. I was like, "Alright," that's when I decided I had to leave. I was isolated. Like, I didn't have a lab, didn't have tenure, I didn't have my own grad students and my own big research area, and, the person I worked with most closely, my co-director of graduate studies, who I was a good friend and I worked with for many, many years, shut me out and was cruel, downright cruel to me. Uh, yeah, that did it, like, I just felt and no one was telling me they knew I felt I had to leave because I was so traumatized, and no one, like, said, "We love you, and we want you to stay, and this is awful." That just didn't happen. In fact, my chair, when I asked him what I should do, because he was still talking to me, unlike my co-director, he said, "Go be a public intellectual." And that's great, but, it's not like you have a salary. I mean, American Enterprise Institute gave me an excellent part-time position, and I'm very grateful to them, but, yeah, you can't just go be a public intellectual and expect to have the same kind of security and meaning in your life, and
Well,
so I got the message that they didn't want me there either, so I'm not gonna, like yeah.
I wanted, it's probably worth bringing up. I was just at a meeting, and a joint friend of ours, Pamela Presti, was speaking there, and she pointed out the game cooties. Um,
Yes, no, I know, yeah,
it
she's
happens as being so, and it's a sad thing that the game of cooties. When you're a kid, you could touch someone, they have cooties, and anyone they, if you touch them, you get cooties, and she used that as an example, but it is very true. Academics are by nature afraid of almost everything, and
yes,
if you publicly defend someone then you're at risk of
yes.
same thing happened to you. And so people tend to just immediately shy away. They might privately tell you that they're supportive, but they would but everyone's afraid of.
Yes, I think that what she said is useful partly because they don't wanna be contaminated.
Yeah.
Um, it's scary for them because reputational damage is, in fact, the worst. When you have a great reputation and suddenly you're a racist or a transphobe, and that I need the undergraduates to trust me. And the only way they're gonna trust me is if my own people who know me best are gonna support me, right? And they were doing the opposite.
Yeah.
And what would work is if they all somehow they are the ones who can brush the cooties off, essentially, by doing their jobs and doing it right and using all of this as a teaching moment to explain how universities work and how there are facts that we need to discover, and that doesn't necessarily say how you understand those facts doesn't speak to somebody's character or whatever. Um, so I think that's useful, and it really exposes the unbelievable cowardice of these administrators and makes me wonder, what are you even doing in academia? Yes, you have fame and money and you're doing your research, but how do you really feel about yourself? Like I still cannot make sense of how these people I trusted and knew and considered friends, how they look at themselves in the mirror, because they have not spoken to me. Like, many of them have not even
Well,
spoken to me or apologized. No one from the administration has said anything.
experience is common, and many people have. That's one of the reasons why it's nice to highlight in this book. It's amazing how
Right.
it's like on a dime. Everyone, universities can
Yes.
rave about you, and then on a dime they'll switch, and if they view it as expedient to let you go, they'll do it,
Right.
and
And just the problem goes away. Just make it go away.
to go away. So let me give you the last word. You've had a lot of words, but let me give you another last word by reading the last words of your piece. You say the Harvard motto is Veritas, truth. But the truth is that the message that the members of the Harvard community receive every day in emails, trainings, posters, pamphlets, and meetings concerns DEI. The message is that what matters most, certainly above the search for truth, is how people's words affect groups deemed, quote, marginalized. I care about ensuring that everyone feels welcome at Harvard and believe the diversity on campus strengthens the institution. But this must not come at the cost of free speech. And the last line is, such a culture supports knowledge, production, dissemination, and preservation is the true mission of the university. And I think that obviously that's absolutely right. And your story deems how explains and demonstrates some of the problems, and there are many facets of it we talk about in the book. And I appreciate your forceful and strong and emotional discussion about this issue, which obviously affects you in strongly, but is an issue far broader. It's been, as always, a pleasure to listen to you and to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, it's Lawrence again. As the Origins podcast continues to reach millions of people around the world, I just wanted to say thank you. It's because of your support, whether you listen or watch, that we're able to help enrich the perspective of listeners by providing access to the people and ideas that are changing our understanding of ourselves and our world and driving the future of our society in the 21st century. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can also leave us private feedback on our website if you'd like to see any parts of the podcast improved. Finally, if you'd like to access ad-free and bonus content, become a paid subscriber at originsproject.org. This podcast is produced by the Origins Project Foundation as a non-profit effort committed to enhancing public literacy and engagement with the world by connecting science and culture. You can learn more about our events, our travel excursions, and ways to get involved at originsproject.org. Thank you.